It's a very family-oriented, teamwork-oriented, safety-oriented, people-first environment.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Bob Luther, co-CEO and founder of Lex Products. Bob, thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
Well, listen, Bob, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Well, we make electrical power distribution for situations where you don't have a building or an infrastructure to plug into. So if you think of your house, where if you're doing something like the Christmas lights, you plug into the outlets that are outside. But if you're doing that at the Christmas tree farm and you're doing a bunch of trees, you need a box like this one that we're showing right here. And that would be typically powered by a generator that's generating power. And then you'd have an outlet coming off of that. And then a box like this would distribute the power with everything that you need in it so that you could plug in a cable like the one here to plug in whatever it is that you need.
Get yourself some AC power wherever you need it.
Right.
So
and you said,
why?
Why do we do it? We do it because we love it. We're passionate about it, and we're very, very good at it.
Those are really good reasons to do it, Bob. So, Bob, I think it's really an interesting kind of product. It's something that I think you don't realize how often it gets used. So maybe we could just start off a little bit by like helping the audience understand. Like you gave us idea of like a Christmas tree farm, but kind of where is like the broad use of these products? Like what market are you in? I mean, I can't imagine your entire business relies on Christmas tree farms.
Yeah, right. So where we really got going in the business was with motion picture filming. And I actually started my business by selling components, parts, like electrical connectors and electrical cable. And this is like 1990, I was in Queens and I happened to call on a motion picture studio, not a major studio, but a place that would be rented out where they were actually filming like MTV videos, things of that nature. But they also did movies. And I happened in there and they're like, you do this kind of stuff? You do this electrical stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I do that. And I had the connectors that they needed to be using. And they literally, it was the owner of the studio, Gary Paris, said, you've got just what we need, but we need it all put together. We need it all connected. Can you do that? And times being what they were, I said, yeah, I can do that. And we started building this type of power distribution for that movie studio. And that's a really good example, if you think about it, where you need a lot of power. And sometimes there's nothing to plug into, right? You can be out in the desert, you can be anywhere, and you need a lot of power for those lights. So that's a really good example.
So did you invent this box?
I was certainly a pioneer
of
this box. So before Lex came around, the way that this would typically be done would be by modifying like an electrical panel that was intended to be installed in a building. So they take an electrical panel and they like cut holes in it and put receptacles in it. And you see this box in front of you. It's made out of rubber. It's a completely different technology. I had seen these boxes in Europe. I had heard of them. And I actually went to the Hanover Fair in Germany and found a source for these rubber enclosures. And started assembling boxes of this nature. And before a box like this came around, a box to do the same thing, I'm not even kidding, might be the size of like a coffin. And it's huge. It's like, and I would come in with something like this, and I wouldn't even have to say anything about it.
We'll take 10.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me just back up a second. So before this box, they would take something that was meant. So the panel, like thinking about anyone who's been in their own basement or whatever, right? Talking about those like breaker panels down there. So someone would take that breaker panel. It's that sort of like battleship gray with the metal flip up thing, but they would just sort of take that on some wood and hang it in the field. Like I just don't.
That's exactly correct, Ari. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they would literally cut holes in it and put the kinds of receptacles that you see here.
When you say receptacles, we're talking about like sort of what we would call like the outlets that you see in your wall. That's like the receptacle.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would just like have it on a wood pole.
A lot of times it would be on a piece mounted. The panel would be mounted on a piece of plywood, and it could be on casters or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And then interestingly, I think the first manufacturer of them was a company called Mole Richardson, which also built the lighting that's used in Hollywood. In fact,
that's exactly what I'm thinking, because someone had to be saying, it's funny that you mentioned it's the light people, but I'm saying someone had to realize that you weren't going to be doing everything on the WB studio lot. And you want to film something, I don't know, Lawrence of Arabia or whatever, in some type of desert, and you need to put the lights, and someone's got to figure the power. It just seems shocking that no one put it together, but I guess they were putting it together.
Well, I mean, Mole Richardson, they were very likely to do that because they were building the lights, but their products were very, very similar to a little more sophisticated than the panels, but they were the same size.
Huge.
Yeah, because it wasn't their main thing.
Right.
So
they were just trying to figure out how to sell their lights.
how do we get it done? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in Queens. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. So you could talk to the folks at the studio. They want you to build the box. You get the box, and then what happens?
Well, they said, we need 10 of them, and we need them by Friday.
It's Thursday,
and we did it.
You did.
We did it. We brought them down there, and they said, all right, we need 20 of these. And I had a very similar experience in the industrial market with the company was Kohler, the plumbing company.
Sure,
Kohler.
Yeah,
well, they have
a Wisconsin company.
Right. Well, they have a big generator. They manufacture generators as well, and at the time they were big in renting their generators, and they needed power distribution for it. And they had heard of us, and flew out to Wisconsin and gave me orders for them in the exact same manner.
Really?
Yeah.
This is the good old days.
But you're talking, we talked about a movie set, right?
Sure, yeah.
Where, you need a lot of power over a great distance.
Yep.
Kohler's specialty was golf events, right?
Oh, sure.
PGA golf.
Yep.
So they did the power for PGA golf. And that's another great example of where you need a lot of power over a great distance and you don't have the infrastructure to plug it in.
Like the hospitality tents, the what do you call them? The stands, sort of like the 18th green. Yeah, don't even think about it. Where I haven't been to the many PGA events. Because it's just occurring to me as I'm sitting here right now. Yeah, there is when the event's not going on, there's no outlets on the 18th green.
Right.
I guess I was just sort of thinking maybe they were running it under the ground. No, they take generators, I guess.
Yeah, they're all over, and there's ramps that you can walk over.
Yeah,
we make those too.
Oh, those like the black sort of walkover ramps that you run the power underneath. You guys make those?
Yeah.
How did that come about? Same thing. Someone tripped over some wires.
No, that was more purposeful.
Yeah.
That was a lot later, and it was just an obvious, product add-on that we could excel at.
So how did you get into the electrical business to begin with? You sort of said you started off, you're going to Queens because you were selling components. I mean, how did you get into the electrical component business?
Well, I've always been in the electrical business. And as far as my business life goes, I was raised at the Harvey Hubble factory on State Street and Bostwick Avenue in Bridgeport. Hubble's probably the, iconic Connecticut electrical manufacturer. And I was in marketing, and I really liked the company, but I had quite an entrepreneurial bent that caused me to go out on my own.
So what happened? You just decided to go on your own and go into distribution? Like, how did you get from marketing to running your own business?
Well, something tells me, boy, move on.
Really?
Don't know what it is. The good Lord bred it in my bones.
So how did you do it? Did you just like go out on a limb? Give me the...
Well, to go into it in a little more detail, I had seen some products in Europe that looked very appealing, like more cutting edge than what was being done in the U.S. And I had this loose idea that I think that some of these products would really appeal to the U.S. market. I had this loose idea that I would start bringing these products over to the U.S. Now, I'll tell you in retrospect that having a loose idea and going into business based on that, that is not a good idea. I had visions of grandeur that, I'd have brochures and people would start flocking to my door to buy these appealing products. And it did not work out that way. But that was the idea. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that. I was like dying to ask. So you had this loose idea. Were you married at the time? Were you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We married, first child on the way.
Good time to just roll the dice.
My wife Liz controlled me, and kept me, balanced. And we started out with a $18,000 home equity loan. It was $20,000, but by the time the fees were done, we had 18 left. We bought a desktop publishing system. That took 11. And I got the brochures out there and nothing.
No bites at all.
No, nothing. So I had a Toyota Camry, and I just got in my Toyota Camry and started going to them, just taking the stuff to them and putting it in front of them.
And
that worked.
Didn't need to spend the $11,000 on the desktop publishing system, apparently.
Correct. Didn't need that.
And so is that the type of systems that you brought to Queens that eventually moved into kind of more of the line of business that you're in today?
Yeah, that one was that was very interesting. It was driven by the connector, the electrical connector. I had a line of electrical connectors. And this was just pure luck, really. The motion picture business had made a decision to switch from DC power to AC power. And they're like, all right, we've got to do this. We got to use AC power. I guess you use these types of connectors.
So I'm just sorry to interrupt, but what do you mean they were on DC power? They weren't using sort of the typical AC at the time?
No, there were separate, generating systems that generated AC power and DC power. And motion picture was very slow to change over to AC power.
Yeah, that's shocking.
But it had to be done.
Right.
And when they did it, they have to switch over their whole systems, and they didn't know, this aspect of it, like how to make the power distribution. They were not very adept at it.
And you just happened to be doing this business at the time they were making that transition, and you happened to call on them at the right time, and you were just the right guy with the right solution at the right time?
I was the guy.
That's amazing. So was that sort of the backbone of Lex Products initially, was making that conversion?
I started with that first studio, Paris film, and then Just Silver Cup was the next one. And then one day, Broadway Studios. One day I was calling on Broadway Studios. I left. I saw that Paramount had opened up in Queens. I walked in and I said, I'm the cable guy. And in fact, that guy, I was out in LA last week and I was talking to him.
The guy all the way back from like the 90s?
Yeah. Yeah. Brian Edwards.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And so you really built this business on the back of all those relationships, those studio relationships?
Initially. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so how much of that, because the business, we went from, desktop publishing, and you kind of hawking your wares to like almost like 130 people in the business today?
Today it's over 250.
250.
Mm-hmm.
So we've come a long way since those early days.
Right.
Is studio still a big part of the business?
Not nearly as much percentage-wise. A lot of it has become commoditized since then, but we do a lot in studios still. A big thing happened when the U.S. went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. They needed power distribution, and the U.S. military found our products and had great demand for them. And the U.S. Marine Corps chose Lex to outfit all their power distribution needs, and that was a major event for the company. And now military business is about a third of what we do.
No kidding. And they found you didn't find them?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. There was one branch of the military, it was called SPAWAR, part of the Navy, and they just needed power, and they rented it from one of our customers, and it was our power. And the Marine Corps saw it, and they invited us to participate in a contest, if you will, like show us what you can do, and we won that. And that's the biggest contract that we ever had.
And that relationship continues?
It does. And it does. And ironically, we just bid a system to them that has not this type of product, but it has energy storage in it. So yeah, it continues to this day.
So where is all of the components of all this made? Like, you initially started sort of repping European products. Is this a domestic product? Is it a wide supply chain? Like, where are all the components of Lex Products come from?
It's highly domestic, surprisingly.
Really? Yeah, that is surprising.
Yeah. So Hubble is still one of our real primary vendors for this type of stuff, but there's other very, very fine companies that do that type of, that type of work. A really big part of what we do is the cable. It's a really big, important part of it. And
the cable that goes from the generator to this box and from this box to other boxes and to the units that get power, the cable is a big part of the business? Exactly,
Ari. Like the cable that's sitting on the desk, but that's about as small of a cable as we do. Okay. They're usually pretty large. And those are, not all, but I'd say 75% of that is made in the U.S.
No kidding.
Yeah, Rhode Island, big plant in Rhode Island, Kentucky. Because of the weight of it, it's just so heavy that it's hard to ship it.
Right. Yeah, there's actually some big cable manufacturers right here in Connecticut as well.
Right.
So because it was so much domestic supply, does that mean that you were able to avoid some of the supply chain issues that a lot of other manufacturers dealt with in the last couple of years?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
No, they hit us, I'm sure, as hard as anybody. I'll give you a couple of examples. And I did mean to point out the enclosure, which we originally sourced from Europe. We make those now.
You make them.
We make them. We press them. We start out with rubber, and it's actually from the rubber tree plant. Okay. It's our own compound. And in a machine that's like, a quarter the size of this room. We press them and we make boxes like that and larger than that. But we couldn't get the rubber at times. There were ingredients in our compound that were unavailable. So circuit breakers, panels, some of the hardest hit areas for supply chain, we were greatly affected by.
So what did you guys do to kind of make it through that period? Because must be a super frustration, and I've heard from many others, the idea that you've got the orders, but for the fact that you can't get parts or one, you mentioned one component of the rubber. Like, one of the most frustrating things I talk to so many manufacturers I hear is like, we have 98% of the part ready to go, but you can't ship it till it's 100. So it doesn't, you could be stacked up, from here to whatever. But if I can't get that last little bit, the last little piece, it just can't ship.
Totally, Ari. That is so true. Some of our products might have 300 components, and if you're missing one of them, you can't ship it. So, it was the period where demand was affected was relatively short. Right. The country got back. Motion picture filming resumed fairly soon.
There's probably no slack in the military demand, I wouldn't have thought.
No, that wasn't a great time for military. They were tied up with other things. It's good now because of things going on in the world. So we just had to live through it. And frankly, the government really helped. We have a lot of employees, and we kept them working.
PPP.
Yeah, it was a big help. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so where are we at with the supply chain now? Back to normal?
It's much better. Yeah. It is alleviating, I would say. We still get a thing here and there that's holding us up, but I got to say it's much better.
How are you feeling about, staffing? I know there's been a constant conversation in all industries, manufacturing in particular, about, employee staffing, finding the right people to fill the positions. How are you guys faring in that area?
Wow, that is a really great question. And our philosophy is that you've got to take care of the people and you've got to make them happy. And it was almost gut-wrenching and counterintuitive that you have to pay people more money, even though times are not great. Right. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything out the door. And we made the decision that no, we're gonna ratchet up. It was necessary. There are a lot of industries where people just demanded it. And I think we saw that, and we did ratchet up, and it was painful to do so. Not that we didn't have our challenges. We really did. Like the beginning of 2022 with that Omicron variant, that was a very, very difficult time. But once that subsided, we really ratcheted up and have been able to attract and keep people based on that. And then the culture, is just such a really huge part of that. You have to have a culture that people are attracted to.
What is the culture at Lex Products? Like when you think about talking to people about why they would work there, what is the culture style that you kind of leverage to attract? Like what is it like to work there?
Well, it's a very family-oriented, teamwork-oriented, safety-oriented, people-first environment.
Well, it's family for sure. I think I think we talked about this before the show. A lot of your family works in the business even.
Right. My wife Liz is still in the business, and I have 3 children that are in the business. And 11 years ago, our family merged with another family business, the Lowry family, and so those 2 families combined their businesses. So it is very, very family oriented.
And they have the Lowry family has a very similar philosophy about the culture and building the culture and investing in people that your family has, apparently.
Absolutely, yeah. Even a little bit more so about being in businesses that are contributing to society, right? That type of philosophy.
Sort of giving back beyond just what you're doing, being kind of looking at how can we impact the community around us.
Right.
And what do you guys do to kind of bring that to life?
Well, we do a lot of food drives, and we also are just in a business that does contribute to society. See, a lot of what we do is based on disaster relief. That's the industrial side of the business. So when there's a hurricane or an earthquake or fires, they have to bring in portable power, and we tend to rally around, and we're providing products for those situations, which we take great pride in. Mm-hmm. And then, a lot of times there'll be activities that center around that. Like we just had a coat drive for the Ukraine, and some of our products are going to, the Ukraine and Poland and those areas.
Yeah, that'd have been hard. So anywhere where you're having power issues and you need power generation, somehow that's got to get to be something you can plug into, and there's an opportunity for Lex Products to get involved.
Right.
How do you enforce, not enforce is not the right word. How do you spread and augment and support the culture inside the business? Like, what do you guys do to foster the culture in the business and help people to kind of, take part in it? 225 plus people, that's a lot of people to rally together.
Well, we just had a town hall meeting, and we had a whole series. We had them in every plant, but we also, for the first time, just had one that was just for office personnel on Zoom. Someone had told me that, I love the town halls, but, the factory and the office, kind of different. This would be interesting to you. One of the things that this person said was like, we're like really attuned to IT, mm-hmm. On the factory floor, maybe not so much. So we just did a town hall strictly for the offices on Zoom. I and my partner also, we're both a little bit enamored of the philosophies of Charles Koch, mm-hmm. right? And one of his biggest precepts is to listen to your employees and act on what they're telling you. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple of the things that influence the culture of the company.
Well, listen, if you think about that, in a lot of ways, right, your employees are your customer in some way, right, if you're going to be leading them. And so listening to your customer and reacting to what they say, no one really ever goes wrong doing that, I don't think.
Right.
So where are you guys? So we didn't really talk about the breadth of the organization. We did talk sort of offline, you and I, but if you've got your headquarters in Connecticut, you got facilities in Florida and California, I believe. How do you find it? Do you find challenges sort of keeping those disparate locations? I mean, that's 3 locations with some distance between them. Do you find it challenging to keep kind of the team feeling unified across 3 time zones and, thousands of miles?
Yeah, that's another great question, Ari. The facility that we have in Davie, Florida, which is right outside of Fort Lauderdale, is a fairly large facility, and we purchased a business down there that we integrated, and integrating those 2 cultures was a significant challenge. The facility that we have in the West is in the San Fernando Valley, where they do a lot of motion picture filming, and we bought a small business out there, and it seemed to integrate just seamlessly. In fact, I was out there last week, and they're actually a shining star. Not to the detriment of any other facility, but there's different challenges, mm-hmm. and there certainly are challenges in keeping disparate facilities aligned. We also have a joint venture in Scotland,
Going 1,000 miles in the other, 3,000 miles in the other direction.
Yeah, well, the entertainment business is global,
Sure
and
is.
we had customers that literally asked us to support them in Europe.
And so now you're trying to integrate that culture into kind of the Lex Products family.
That's actually been going on for a long time, and the individuals over there, we feel like they're family. So that has been a very easy
Do you find that
integration.
do you use technology to do that? You reference Zoom. I mean, do you guys have sort of meetings in between? Is there not too much communication, say, between Scotland and LA? Like, how do those people stay connected to each other?
Well, I think Zoom has made it an awful lot easier. We also travel, and we've been doing it for a long time. I mean, we've had numerous facilities for a long time. So it is very challenging, but between Zoom and being face-to-face is how we deal with it.
Face to face, it's hard to beat that. So what's sort of the future look like? I mean, you guys have been on the cutting edge of power distribution since the early days, right? Helping people think of new ways to get power where they needed to get to. I don't know about you, but it seems to me in business, you're either kind of growing and coming up with new stuff or you're dying. So what's the future look like?
Totally. And the big development with power distribution where, 30 years ago, the new thing was just doing it, right? Just building power
Right, exactly.
distribution. It's evolved quite a bit to a lot of this business has become commoditized. But the new thing with power distribution is to integrate energy storage into it.
Like batteries?
Yeah. Energy storage has the potential to make power distribution systems far more efficient. And in this case, what that translates to is using a lot less fuel. So that's the up and coming technology.
That must be pretty appealing. I guess I'm just sorry to interrupt, just thinking out loud.
quite
Like
right.
I can think to myself that if I'm, especially in a military application, but if I have a forward operating base in Afghanistan, if I can reduce the amount of times I need to deliver diesel, or I assume they're using diesel or whatever out there, right? Because it's not like in the Afghan Kush, you've got sort of a Connecticut natural gas or whatever to sort of plug into. So being able to deliver less fuel, probably also true, by the way, if I'm doing like a film shoot, right? If I think about doing Lord of the Rings in, the mountains of New Zealand, the less gas I got to bring up there, the better off I am. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just like processing out loud.
Totally great comments. I mean, you don't want a convoy of fuel trucks going across the Afghan landscape, right? I mean, that's a pretty bad target.
Right.
And then there's the cost of it. Exactly. Yeah. So integrating the battery technology is a game changer. But also, Ari, the power distribution business is unstable. We talk about the destabilization of the power grid. The power grid can be relied on less and less to deliver all the power needs that we have. So, our business, because of that, is really a growing business.
And so what are the challenges? Let me say it differently. Are there challenges to integrating the battery technology?
Yes, there really are. I mean, one of the strengths of our company is that we really know how to do this, right? I mean, we're really good at it. We know how to do it, and we know how to do it safely. And that's one of the things that prevents people from doing it on their own. I mean, you can do it, but do you really want to? Do you really want to be doing that? We've got this down pretty well. Now, when you start bringing batteries into the picture, it really goes almost from like one-dimensional to three-dimensional. Knowing what you're doing for both being able to control the batteries, and batteries are DC power, so you have to integrate them into AC power, plus the safety aspects is just a whole nother dimension. So there's a lot of technology involved, And there's a lot of expertise that's needed.
How goes the battery integration challenge?
Well, we've been involved in a lot of projects, kind of like trial projects, mostly for the military to try out systems that will make the power distribution systems more effective. But we have been fortunate to get our first commercial orders over the last 6 months or so. So coincidentally, we are literally about to ship our first commercial versions this month.
Oh, really?
Like maybe like next week.
Oh, that's amazing. So this is the cutting edge of a new, potentially a whole new world where battery storage of power becomes, a standard add-on to like traditional power generation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so one thing I'm trying to piece together is, a battery is a unit of storage, right? Not a unit of generation. So how does the battery actually make it more efficient? Because you still need to generate, right?
Right. Where it makes it more efficient is that the generator doesn't have to be on all the time. Okay. Now, actually, see, the product that we're going to start shipping is actually for a construction site.
Okay.
And what it's powering is cranes. And when you think about it,
Those giant cranes you see putting up like skyscrapers or whatever.
exactly.
Okay.
Now, those cranes might actually be doing work like 4 hours over the course of a day where they're actually moving something.
Right. Sure, yeah, because you move a big giant beam and then it's got to stay there while someone welds it or rivets it or whatever. And at that period of time, all the crane's doing is stationary. It doesn't need to move again. So
Yeah, when it's actually doing the work is a pretty limited amount of time.
I gotcha.
But those really big generators are on all day long, right?
Sure, burning gas and whatever.
Yeah, and it's all about the fuel in these instances. So the battery allows the energy to be stored so that the generator only needs to be on when the energy in the battery is depleted to a certain level. And in this case, the power in the battery also gives an additional boost to the crane itself. It provides better power to the crane.
Why is that?
It just augments it. It's actually, for a brief period of time, you can do more power than the generator actually is capable of doing.
Because the battery output could exceed the max output of the generator. The generator can only do X amount of output, but if you charge up the battery, I can actually output more than the generator that's charging the battery.
Exactly.
You could even get a smaller generator to trickle charge the battery over a period of time and then use that extra output from the battery to power more. So you actually could get double savings. I'm sorry, I'm like doing
triple
math here.
Yeah, double, triple. Yeah,
really?
Use a smaller generator and you can still get more output.
That's amazing. So that's a pretty cool innovation that we're in the midst of. That's awesome, man. Mm-hmm. Well, I know we're running a little bit low on time. Mm-hmm. Before we switch over to rapid fire round of questions, I do need to ask you a question about the name of the business. So people probably know if they watch or listen a lot that I had a Superman mug all the time, and it did not escape my notice that your name's Bob Luther and the business is called Lex Products. So I got to imagine Superman connection exists, or I guess maybe the anti-hero Superman connection exists. Care to comment?
Yeah, that's that is correct. I had mentioned at the onset that I started in business with the Hubble Company, and my last name's Luther, and everyone there called me Lex. And I was in marketing, and I even had a little bit of a skunk works kind of going on where I would get things out that were a little bit, if it were hard to get out, I had ways of doing it. And people would say, oh, you'd have to go to like Lex Products to get that done, So
Is that right?
yeah.
So, and then when you decided to strike it on your own, that was the obvious choice?
With a little bit of a hiccup, my wife, Liz, did not like the name Lex because she didn't want us investing in, it's just not serious enough. I mean, that's a superhero villain. We can't call it Lex. We came up with some hokey name that nobody liked or could pronounce. And we were just sitting around one day and she said, you know what? Lex is probably a good way to go.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And bada bing, bada boom, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's so
and
funny.
it's worked really well. It's a great name.
It is.
Nobody forgets me.
No, definitely not. I mean, the only thing is you've got hair, and I feel like that doesn't really work. That's really off-brand, for the name. But other than that, I really love it. Well, Bob, it's been super interesting hearing about the journey. You ready for some rapid-fire round of questions before we wrap it up?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Thank you. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Oh, Dunkin' all the way.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Pickup truck.
There you go. Staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic destination.
If you had to do something other than be the co-CEO and founder of Lex Products, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, nothing get in your way, what would you do with your time?
Well, next thing I'm going to do is teach my grandson how to play tennis.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Good Profit by Charles Koch.
Good Profit by Charles Koch. Well, that's a list. I don't think that's in on our reading list.
Oh, yeah, you got to.
What's something, Bob, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
Do what the customer wants. Listen to your customers. But now it's more about listening to your people.
Yes, customer in a different way.
Right.
What's something, Bob, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Bob, and if young Bob would listen to you, it would have a real positive impact on his life?
Listen to your people sooner.
Learn lesson one faster. Dude, that's awesome. Bob, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I can see how passionate you are for what you guys do and the value that you guys provide. It's been really inspirational learning about it, and I really appreciate you spending some time with me.
It's been my pleasure.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.